समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉप अप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या? समझ में नहीं आया।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
अब समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme related documents carefully.
When you think about India's security, when you worry about India's security or plan India's security, what is it that comes to your mind first? What do you think about? So, look at me. If this is north, right? This is south. This will not show like that on the compass, but I'm just explaining this for the ease of understanding. If this is north, this is south, and this is west, and this is east. Now, to our south is the ocean, to our north is the Himalayas, but there is China. North is something we worry about because of the Chinese presence there and unsettled borders, undefined and undemarcated borders. LAC has not been formally demarcated between our two countries. We worry about the West. We've always worried about the West. We fought multiple wars across that frontier. Also, that's a source of terrorism and subversion coming into India. That is because Pakistan resides there. It is the East that we worry about least of all. Especially for the past 20-25 years, we simply haven't worried about the East. In fact, there was a time when there were some concerns when Khalida Zia ruled Bangladesh. There were some incidents on the border. Some of the Indian militant groups, terrorists, they were finding refuge there. But all that changed under the long reign of Sheikh Hasina, and we stopped worrying about the East. Occasionally, trouble arose in Sri Lanka, but once again, Sri Lanka worked very closely with India. In fact, India worked very quietly with Sri Lanka and let Sri Lanka, also helped Sri Lanka in many ways, destroy LTTE in 2009. That happened when the Tamil Nadu elections were going on in spite of that. So they destroyed LTTE, which is something that worked for Indian security as well. Nepal has been up and down, there have been some issues, but generally India's security threats and security concerns have been looking north and looking west. Lately, and this is not coming from an insecurity, but out of a motivation for proactive defense of India's larger strategic interest. India has been looking southwards at the ocean, Indian Ocean, then going right up to the Pacific. So India's focus has also shifted south into the ocean across the Indo-Pacific, where India is a member of the Quad. All of this was done while India's mind space, India's strategic mind space did not have to spare much space or much of a compartment for the East. That has now changed. Why are we talking about this? The reason we talk about this is that the Prime Minister has been in Bangkok attending the BIMSTEC summit. What is BIMSTEC? It is the Bay of Bengal Initiative for Multi-Sectoral Technical and Economic Cooperation, BIMSTEC or a BIMSTEC. Now, why is it called? Why does it have such a complex name? It's obviously because the idea was not to put any country's name in this. In Bangkok, it was also a good opportunity. I know a lot of people would have been upset if we had raised a question, should Modi agree to meet Yunus or not? I am sure on social media and elsewhere, even if I had asked the question here, bulk of the response would have been, no, how can you do this? Yunus is doing this to the minorities, Hindus, especially in Bangladesh. He's threatening India. Why should he meet him? Prime Minister Modi is smart, he's sensible, he's done the right thing. So he met Yunus, he said his thing to Yunus, which is to look after the minorities and to control any rhetoric that vitiates the atmosphere. The Bangladeshi side spoke to the media as well, and they said Yunus also took up many issues with Prime Minister Modi. He raised his own concerns. He said there should not be quote unquote incendiary statements coming out of Sheikh Hasina. And also, he asked for extradition of Sheikh Hasina. He also asked for expediting of negotiations on Ganga River Waters Accord. India and Sri Lanka have a Ganga River Waters Accord. However, this is coming to an end in 2026. It has to be renegotiated before that. Maybe at some point we'll do an explainer on it separately. But basically what it means is that the water that comes into the river Ganga, that reaches the river Hooghly in Kolkata, India needs a minimum amount of water to keep the Kolkata port navigable, keep the Kolkata port running. This agreement says that India can take, I'm giving you very broad figures, India can take up to 40,000 cusecs of water as long as at least 35,000 go to Bangladesh. This is not for the flood season. In monsoon season, there is a lot of surplus water there, but it is for the drier months, for the leaner months. Bangladesh wants more water, and this negotiation will begin. I suspect that the Indian side, our side, would think that they'd rather talk about this to a more stable and to a more formal government in Bangladesh. This one is seen to be transient. So those are issues that remain, and those issues both sides shared with each other. That's why it's a very good thing that the two leaders talked. In some ways also, this was an answer to the problem called SAARC, South Asian Association of Regional Cooperation. That was set up with great enthusiasm. In fact, the initiative had come from the Bangladesh ruler at that point, General Ziaur Rahman, and then it grew. There was a time when all countries were participating in it quite enthusiastically. In 1988 was the most enthusiastic SAARC summit, which took place in Islamabad. Rajiv Gandhi had gone for it. In fact, I was among the journalists who had gone to write about it. And then it looked like peace will now break out between India and Pakistan. However, not long after that, Benazir Bhutto starting to get into trouble. Stories came out that the room where the meeting between her and Rajiv Gandhi was held, that was bugged by the ISI. Some of those conversations were leaked to some quote-unquote friendly media, and apparently these included stuff like her complaining to Rajiv Gandhi that her army was not letting her be free with policy making, or things would move much faster between India and Pakistan. From 1989 onwards, we know Pakistan started funding, financing terrorists in Kashmir and also sending in infiltrators into Kashmir. So the entire situation changed. Since then, once the Kashmir situation got fouled up, SAARC became a victim of the India-Pakistan rivalry. So if a SAARC summit takes place, Pakistan is bound to raise Kashmir, India is bound to raise terrorism, the two sides will fight. So that finished the whole raison d'etre of SAARC. In fact, those were the days when SAARC used to hold South Asian Games. It was great for India because those are the only games where we would get 100 plus gold medals. If they wanted, we could get even more. But all of that stopped. SAARC is right now a frozen, I will not say dead organization. It's a frozen organization. It's in deep freeze, in coma, deep freeze, whatever you call it. Now, because the SAARC mechanism had broken down, it was a new idea to start something along the eastern territories. That look, on the western side, you have the big block called Pakistan. Abhi kuch nahi kar sakte uske bare mein. How do you solve a problem like Pakistan? Let's see. But on the eastern side, challenges are not so massive, and there are no zero-sum game situations on the eastern side. So we can set up a new, I won't say alliance, but a new institution. That's how BIMSTEC come into being. BIMSTEC was meeting in Bangkok this year. Members of BIMSTEC, India, of course, Bhutan, Bangladesh, Myanmar, Thailand, Nepal, and Sri Lanka, which reminds me, there was a time when there was a joint secretary for this general region in the MEA. That was joint secretary, Maldives, Bangladesh, Bhutan, Burma, and Sri Lanka. So the joke used to be that so and so, and we used to say that to joint secretaries who were sitting in that position, "Arey bhai, aap to joint JS MBBS ho gaye ho, right? JS MD kab ho gaye?" That was a joke. The fact is that BIMSTEC generally looks at that region. Now it is expanding its vision. Why? Because earlier, Lucas policy, which was initiated far back, almost 3 decades back by P.V. Narasimha Rao. And that again was a reaction to the bloc on the western side. That look, if your western neighbor says Kashmir or nothing, right, then leave them be, let them be. If they give you trouble, deal with that militarily or through intelligence agencies. But on the eastern side, start something new. And the east of India is where the new global wealth is being created, because that takes you into China, that takes you into ASEAN. That's where the new jobs, the new wealth, the new taxes are being created. So P.V. Narasimha Rao era, this was called India's Look East policy. Prime Minister Modi, as soon as he came to power, renamed it as Act East policy. There are many elements to its policy, but again, the most important countries critical to this policy are the countries that share borders with India. That is where now new challenges have arisen. And that's the reason I say that now, while earlier you could pretty much leave very tiny space in your strategic mind space for what's happening to your east, now you have to focus a great deal on your east as well. We know that Sheikh Hasina's departure took place in dramatic circumstances. This is not something that India wanted. She's in India now. That has led to a sense of popular disgruntlement and anger with India. The new regime in Bangladesh, I will call it a regime because this is not coming through any legitimate method. This was put into power through street protests. They've been demanding Sheikh Hasina's extradition. On what basis, I don't know, because there is an extradition treaty which has many formal requirements. So it doesn't look like Bangladesh government particularly wants to push for it formally, although they sent a note verbal. And even now, when Prime Minister Modi met Muhammad Yunus, the chief advisor of Bangladesh, of the interim government there, this question was raised again. But Bangladesh, meanwhile, has been making other moves. We know that Bangladesh has been reaching out to Pakistan. Merchant shipping between Bangladesh and Pakistan, direct merchant shipping has resumed for the first time since 1972, since the formation of Bangladesh. A Pakistani military delegation has visited Bangladesh, and ISI delegation has visited Bangladesh shortly after the fall of Sheikh Hasina's government. At one of Dhaka's storied campuses, a Jinnah memorial meeting was held on Jinnah's anniversary, something you would not have imagined in Bangladesh. Since then, Dr. Muhammad Yunus has been making many statements and moves which cause concern in India. For example, he's been repeatedly talking about reviving the SARC process. He knows that that's like rubbing his finger in India's eye, because SARC would mean Pakistan, SARC would mean the Kashmir issue between India and Pakistan. And once again, India is the largest country in the region. At SARC, then Pakistan will constantly challenge India and foul up the environment. Then he's gone to China now, and he made that famous or infamous statement. I will read out that statement for you, and I will also meanwhile play for you on your screens the 50-word editorial we wrote on it, which I thought I thought a great deal before finalizing it, because we use the expression senile. Now, I have known Dr. Yunus for a long time. I know him to be a very fine mind, and maybe he will say that he did not mean to invite China into India's backyard, saying that this is the only seafront available there. We are its guardians. You come in, and India has these 7 landlocked states, which at one point he describes as a country. So he might just say, what I said was, these are landlocked states. They need goods. They need to send goods out. They need to receive goods. They don't have access to the sea. That access can be provided through Bangladesh. In fact, in the Hasina era, work was on in that process. Through Tripura, a bridge on the river, and then a bridge on the Kushiara River, and then going into Bangladesh and going to Chittagong port. And that would have given India's northeast connectivity to the Bay of Bengal. Now he's inviting the Chinese there. The language that he spoke, because one, he said country. Second, he said it's landlocked. Third, he said we are the only guardians of this waterfront, of this coast. Fourth, he said the Chinese should come in, they will benefit. Now, all of that added up to to a loaded sounding statement. And anybody, if he has good diplomats working with him, if he had a script, I don't think they would have written this unless they really meant him to say this and at the very least troll India. I'm almost tempted to use a word beginning with F followed by I, by the way. But I will just read out to you the statement that Yunus made in Beijing. He said 7 states of India, eastern part of India called Seven Sisters, they are landlocked country, landlocked region of India. They have no way to reach out to the ocean. We are the only guardian of the ocean for all this region. So this opens up a huge possibility. So this could be an extension of the Chinese economy. Build things, produce things, market things, bring things to China. Why would they bring things in Bangladesh and bring them to China? I don't know. I think China's entire emphasis was to produce things in China and take them to other countries, including America and India. Nevertheless, Yunus said this, bring it out to the whole rest of the world. That's what he says. But this was a tone-deaf statement, which is what we said in this 50-word editorial. Please see. Now, response to this came from our Foreign Minister Jaishankar, who said, and I quote from him, cooperation is an integrated outlook, not one subject to cherry picking. And he went on to say, while speaking at BIMSTEC ministerial meeting, and I quote again, our Northeast region in particular is emerging as a connectivity hub for the BIMSTEC with a myriad network of roads, railways, waterways, grids and pipelines. The completion of the trilateral highway will connect India's Northeast all the way to the Pacific Ocean. And I will tell you what the trilateral highway is. This trilateral highway is the India-Myanmar Thailand highway. This was envisioned in 2002. Construction started in 2012. It was supposed to be completed by 2015. It's nowhere near that. That tells you the degree of difficulty in that region. Because you know what? While we say things have now become unstable in Bangladesh, Bangladesh has a new regime which will go at some point and be replaced by a more formal government. When, we don't know. So to that extent, it's unstable. Second, Myanmar. Myanmar is in this horrible civil war in which the military junta, which has the largest military force, actually does not control or does not even have presence in large portions of Myanmar, particularly regions bordering India. And those are regions where the tribal populations of Myanmar are from the same ethnic stock as the tribal populations on the Indian side. That's why nearly 1 lakh of them have come into Indian territory as refugees. So if Kukis, Chins, Mizos or the larger Zomi tribes come in from that side, these tribes will give them refuge. That is a code of honor between tribal communities. Also, the tribal communities have traditionally been allowed free movement across those borders. So that's become a problem for India. Second, because in the Rakhine province of Myanmar, the junta has gone after the Muslim minority. A lot of them have fled. They've also been bombed repeatedly from the air, much before Netanyahu started that in Gaza. The Myanmarese junta started that in the Rakhine province. Now, about 1 million of them at least have gone to Bangladesh and have refuge there. In fact, Bangladesh will worry greatly now if the US aid stops giving any money for that, which I presume they have stopped already. So that will bring a great deal of stress on Bangladesh. But some of them have come into India as well. And how many have come remains a contested point. But the fact is, they have become a factor in India's polarized politics. So once again, Bangladesh has this uncertainty and Bangladesh is now making this mischief, reaching out to China, reaching out to Pakistan. All that is at the very least, as I said earlier, trolling India, but at its worst, it's now posing a threat to India. And then this mention of Siliguri corridor, that is really India's exposed jugular, right? If you cut the jugular, a human body or any living body dies. This jugular is 60 kilometers long, only 20 kilometers wide, with Bangladesh on one side, Nepal on the other. Both countries have their instability and both countries have governments which come and go. So I mentioned Bangladesh, I mentioned the problems in Myanmar. Myanmar ahead, also shares a border with China. That's why China is very involved with Myanmar. It is Myanmar's armed forces biggest supplier. It is also the Bangladeshi armed forces biggest supplier. In fact, 70% of Bangladesh's arms imports are from China. Why they are not from India? That the reason lies in politics. India, in fact, at one point Indian Navy gifted one of its kilo class Russian made or maybe even Soviet made kilo class submarines to Myanmar's Navy. They have it, but Sri Lanka Navy bought a similar submarine from China. So that is a very deep connection that China has with both of these countries. Nepal, again to India's east, but the other side of Siliguri corridor, say to the west of Siliguri corridor, has its own instabilities. Governments come, governments go. Now there are protests in favor of restoring the royalty. I don't see right now a threat to the regime there, but the regime there, I won't say regime for Nepal because it's an elected government. The government there is not particularly friendly to India. We know that over the last 3-4 years, Nepal's position has taken a turn. They laid claims. They revived old claims to large sections of Indian territory in Pithoragarh district of Uttarakhand, the Lipu Lake Pass, etc. That's the route that takes you to Mansarovar. They then added that to their national map, and put it to vote in their national parliament. All these bad ideas pass unanimously in our parliaments because who will take a position against it, whatever they might whisper to you on the side. So Nepal has that hostility, and Nepal also has been playing China. This Nepalese government has been playing China against India, and this tamasha goes on. An additional factor is earlier Indian Army used to recruit heavily in Nepal for its Gurkha regiments. Now Nepalese government said that since all your recruitment is for Agniveers, we will not allow any recruitment. India says, all right, it's your wish, because we have enough Gurkhas in India, enough indigenous Gurkhas to fill up the ranks, the vacancies in these regiments. So that tension point has also arisen. So there is tension on both sides of the Siliguri corridor, and that's why this mention by Muhammad Yunus is seen as very loaded in India, and it has caused concern. It's not as if India has ever taken this place lightly. If you see Siliguri corridor, right in the heart of it, right at Siliguri, is one large Indian Air Force base, that is Bagdogra. There is a core station there, right? There is a core station there. There are lots of forces in Sikkim, because if at all the Chinese have to come in and threaten India here, they will have to come through Sikkim. That's why India carried out Operation Juniper and physically stopped the Chinese troops from coming too close in the Doklam area, from where they could get a look at the Siliguri corridor. And that standoff took place in 2017. I will share with you the story that Snehesh Alex Philip did on Operation Juniper. So there's a lot of Indian armed forces. There's an air base at Bagdogra, not far away, just about 136 kilometers away to the east at Hashimara in Alipurdwar district of West Bengal. It was a part of what used to be the original princely state of Kuch Bihar. That is the Hashimara Air Base. Remember, Indian Air Force has got all of 2 squadrons of Rafales. One squadron is based in Ambala, that looks at the western and northern borders, or western and northern threats. That means it counters the Chinese threat in Ladakh, it counters all of the Pakistani threat. The second squadron, the second of our only 2 squadrons, is based in Hashimara. Again, the eye is on this particular region. So this is not a region that India takes lightly. India can ever take lightly, and it's not going to be so easy for anybody to just walk across it. It will not be a walk in the park. It will be a very difficult thing. Even the Chinese know it. However, to talk about this is very insensitive and very politically incorrect, and that is what has also forced this focus on the eastern sector. Over the past few years, other crises have arisen. Sri Lanka, for example, the Rajpaksa government melted away. There was uncertainty. There were protests on the street. The economy had melted. Sri Lanka took IMF money. Just think about the situation in India's neighborhood. Three of India's next door neighbors have recently taken IMF money, and each one will be quite happy if they could get some more. That is Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka. So they've all had crisis. Sri Lanka, after the crisis, had a very peaceful transition. They held a very peaceful, fair, credible election, which threw a surprise in the election. So instead of the familiar parties, they brought in a hard leftist to power. The arrival of that hard leftist again brings in the China concern with Sri Lanka, and that is something again that the Prime Minister is addressing, and that's the reason the Prime Minister is there in Sri Lanka. That's his first visit there after the election of the new government in Sri Lanka. The Chinese are very active. India is very active. In fact, India is now building an entire causeway from Dhanushkodi on our side to Mannar on the Sri Lankan side. So you could effectively drive from India to Sri Lanka. Right now you can take a ferry, etc. But this is a landmark project. Again, the Chinese are present there. Chinese have bought assets there. They now own the port of Hambantota. They have a large jetty in Colombo, where Adani has bought one on India's behalf. So this is a tere ghar ke samne situation. At Trincomalee, the Chinese have also built a very large refinery. So that again is a matter of concern, because India's eastern coastline is militarily never as heavily defended. In fact, it's hardly militarily defended compared to what the western borders are. And now India has to start thinking a little bit more about the east. Now, the only country I haven't talked about is Bhutan, because Bhutan really is a very peaceful country. It's a very stable country. The royalty has given up some powers to the elected government. The king is respected by everybody. However, the Chinese are increasing pressure on Bhutan. They are making claims to large chunks of Bhutanese territory and then offering a deal. It's like Donald Trump. That's what the powerful do. He says, I will put 36% tariffs on you. Then you say, no, I will reduce my tariffs on you to 10%. Okay, then mine are 20%, right? So it will come down like that. So the Chinese are also saying, I own all of this territory of yours, and on some of it, I've started building my villages as well. And I can settle all this, and our border issues can all be settled if you are just reasonable and give me a little bit of what I want. And the little bit of what the Chinese want is in the Doklam region, because they also want to be sitting there atop something overlooking the Siliguri corridor. So that becomes the nub of all these concerns. That's the reason I say that India's strategic vision now has to become 360 degrees. At any point of time, it has to be 360 degrees. That's a theoretical thing. You have to look at the West and not worry so much about the East. But right now, there is a lot of activity across our eastern frontiers, which is a cause of big concern. And that's why Prime Minister's visit now to Sri Lanka, before that to BIMSTEC in Bangkok, and meetings with all his counterparts in these BIMSTEC members countries is a very important development.